going on, buddy? Is that a little bit of wingage there back there? What's happening? Something you want to tell me? No, it's fine. Pulls the cloak tighter.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. Alright, so what's on the agenda for today?
So today we're going to talk about Draconians, Dragonborn, who did it better? I don't know. You decide after we get done, but we're going to start off with kind of like going over both of the different races and, and then, our final thoughts.
So Dragonborn originated in the book Races of the Dragon in 2006, but was released fully into the game for 4th edition in 2008. Dragonborn are an awesome race that are very draconic and lizard-like, having the scales that were originally more of a brassy, bronzy, ruddy hue after they had kind of mixed through the races, making a general skin color or scale color for all of them. They're elemental in nature, possessing the abilities of their forebearers and granting that elemental resistance. And they don't have tails, though some players like to say, I want the tail.
Yeah, so originally they started off in 3.5 towards the tail end, and they actually started as normal humanoids that were kind of blessed with a ritual by Bahamut, the good dragon god, and then they could turn into Dragonborn. Like you said, they later become their own race that, either the dragons themselves or a dragon god, then created them, and they kind of hatched from dragon eggs and then became their own thing. The weird thing is, though, with Fizzbands, they kind of like updated the lore to Dragonborn, and it's also updated in D&D Beyond as well. So that the entry in D&D Beyond is not the same as the Player's Handbook anymore. In the Player's Handbook, originally, it really just talked about them all kind of being this monochromatic color that's all the same, whereas, in the updated version, they're like, well, sometimes there's, throwbacks, or the ancestry runs really strong for a particular type of dragon, so the colors come out. So they've kind of retracted how, the Dragonborn work, aesthetically anyway. I mean, mechanically, they're kind of the same, although Fizzband upgraded them and made them slightly better anyway. So even that part has been retracted a little bit. So they've evolved and changed, but I feel like they've evolved and changed due to the way players are actually representing Dragonborns at the table.
I myself, I've always loved dragons. It's right there in the name, Dungeons and Dragons. So I feel like having this very weakened race of what Dragonborn are presented, they lost the ability to kind of really tie in the nature of what those dragons represent. And I haven't met a single player that prefers the brassy, bronzy, ruddy color to let me look like the dragon that I'm supposed to be representing.
Yeah, so, I mean, without getting too deep into the weeds with mechanics and stuff like that, Dragonborn, they have resistance to a particular energy type. They get a breath weapon, and that's like the bulk of their kit for what they get.
So what are Draconians?
Draconians came about in the 1980s during the War of the Lance, and the Dragonlance saga they were originally released into those books, and this might be spoilers, if you haven't read those, but in the War of the Lance, the evil dragons sided with the evil dragon queen Tahikis, which is now basically just Tiamat, right? But they're very similar anyway, and clearly Tahikis was based off of Tiamat anyway. But that being said, all the evil dragons were in on this war, but the good dragons weren't, because the evil dragons stole all the good dragon eggs and were like, if you jump into this fight, we're going to do bad things to your eggs. But surprise sucker, they already did bad things to their eggs, and they hatched Draconians from them.
So Draconians are corrupted dragon eggs. There's these humanoids that, have hatched out of these eggs. Rituals are done that require, foul draconic magic from the Dragon Queen, and you get one for each of the 5 metallic dragon types, each that have their own, essentially, death throw ability, whether it, sprays acid, dissolves, flesh around it, whether the person, or the Draconian dies and releases clouds of petrifying gas, all kinds of nasty things that happen whenever you kill a Draconian. And the evil dragon armies have used them to kind of be the generals and like shock troops of the armies for the War of the Lance.
Yeah, the different Draconian types had different roles in the war. Your Baz was kind of like your lowliest Draconian, and they were basically the foot soldiers. But they're also really annoying if you fought them in melee, because when they died, they would turn to stone and your weapon might get stuck to them, which can be really annoying when you're in a fight. Kopaks were probably the next weakest, but they also had specialized roles. They tended to be more like their infiltrators and spies. Then you had Bozaks, which tended to be more like captains on the battlefield, but they were also magical in nature as well. So they were basically like Geshes.
So Sivak are based off of the Silver Dragonborn, the largest of all of them. These are the ones that really fully have the ability to fly and can come onto a battlefield and just sow all kinds of terror. But it's really the Aurochs who are the most intelligent and most magical, though they are the least draconic looking, because they don't even possess wings where the other ones do. But that tends to throw people off because they're actually the most magical and the most powerful of all of the all of the Draconians.
Yeah, so and they all have different abilities, like when they died, turning into balls of lightning, pools of acid, poison, exploding in fire, I think is one of them as well, and then turning to stone. They used to also have an ability where they would take their weapons and put them in their mouths and run on all fours while flapping their wings, and it would like increase their speed, so they would get like a boost of speed, so they get into combat faster. I know K-Pax are the ones that have poisons, and they would like be able to lick their blades while in battle to try and poison the enemies.
All right, so that is a vast difference. While there does seem to be some elemental crossover between them, mechanically they're vastly different. So, what do we do with Draconians and Dragonborn? How do we feel it should be represented in games versus how it's portrayed just in stat blocks?
Well, one of the problems with Draconians is their finite, right? Like there's no female Draconians. They have no way of producing. Although I will say, more recently there was a couple novels released. I think it was called Doom Brigade was the first one. I think there was only 2 series, and spoilers if you haven't read those books, they've been out a while now, even though they came out much later after Dragonlance. There's a discovery of a second clutch of Draconians, and they're all female in that clutch. So, it does create the possibilities of now they can breed true and have a true race of Draconians. And also, like the Draconians in those novels weren't nearly as evil as the ones represented previously, because they've been away from the dragon armies for a long time. The war has ended. They know that they have a finite existence. So the main clan of Draconians in that book, they're like in this war with dwarves, but they don't kill the dwarves, and the dwarves generally don't kill them. They just knock each other out and steal each other's stuff and have like raids. But it's kind of like, it's like an unspoken rule that like there's kind of violence, but no one really gets permanently hurt.
That's really hysterical. Now, if you get into Fizzbands does kind of expand things outside of Dragonlance, incorporating, these general type of Draconians, but rather than linking them to the specific of the, metallic Dragonborns, each of these is, relegated towards any of the 3 different dragon types, be it metallic, chromatic, or gem. So any one of them could be incorporated within that. And they're a little more generic looking in regards to the type rather than towards a particular metallic dragon.
So the biggest problem with using Draconians is they're not really a good playable race, right? One part of their kit happens when they die, so generally not great if you're a player character that have one of your best abilities be the one that takes you out of the game.
Worse than that, it's when it reaches 0 hit points, not even when you die.
Yeah.
Because player characters tend to operate from a different standpoint. Now, yes, you can say, oh, well, we always go and coup de grace our enemies, blah, blah, blah. But without that, like, in my table, it's never mentioned, whether it be something that happens by someone's mindset or not. So it's a scenario where, like, as a player character, it's not when you reach -10, it's not when you reach negative half your health, it's when you reach 0, this happens. And it doesn't care about what else is around you. So, like, you would literally have to be fighting alone because you could wind up killing your own party member when you die.
I mean, if I'm going to die, I don't want to be alone anyway, so. Tell them about it. It'll be a nice little surprise.
Well, there is that angle, but go on.
So that's one of the problems, right? And then the other problem is they're just not really calibrated as player characters. So you could do some tweaking, but for the most part, they're just too powerful to be player characters. You'd have to really water them down.
Right. So now let's step beyond, what's there. We look at this lore, Fizzbands has allowed you to take these kind of Draconians into more of any other realm, not linking them to the War of the Lance, though if you're playing Dragonlance, that's where they came from. So having this new thing that's now kind of welcomed everywhere else, what do we feel about, the lore? How do you feel would be a good fit for adding them to a regular game?
Well, I mean, I would say throughout the editions and, and many D&D campaign, DMs and players are like, want some kind of dragon people in their games. The Dragonborn were created to kind of scratch that itch. Mm-hmm. But Draconians actually predate them, and Dragonborn are almost a better solution to the Draconian from the player side of things because of the power level that they represent. But if you wanted to introduce it into your game, for one, you could just do the War of the Lance if you wanted to and just strip out any of the Dragonlance specific campaign setting stuff and just put it in the Forgotten Realms or your world or whatever you wanted to do. Or for your own games, you don't want to bother with pre-written adventures, you could just take them and create your own lore. You could have an evil dragon god that created them. You could have had something else. You could literally take that story of evil dragons steal good dragon eggs, make monsters from them, right? You don't really have to change a whole lot of that. That could happen anywhere. Then you could just tell the story as to why they did it, how the good dragons responded, how was it resolved. Does that mean now all Draconians are evil in your game, or you don't believe in absolutes and they're people like anybody else, so they can be good, bad, or indifferent? Maybe you've decided there are female Draconians in your world, so they can breed true and there can be more of them.
So I was looking at it, and I like to have things connected where possible. So I was thinking in a direction of, what if you were to have, like, I know Forgotten Realms had the spell plague, which caused all kinds of problems, but like, what happens if some kind of disease went rampant and a generation of Dragonborn wound up
getting powered up?
getting powered up, but in a way, like, some good, some bad. And you could still breed true. Like, they're not linked to the specific dragons the way, the book represents them. But you now have all of these slightly smaller, slightly larger, essentially Dragonborn, but they're vastly different in, form and function. And eventually, like, maybe they breed faster, maybe they grow faster. So, like, they eventually establish their own population, a cure is resolved, or whatever it was that caused it, doesn't stop the Dragonborn from being able to have more eggs or more kin. So eventually the Dragonborn correct their problem, but now you have this other race of creatures out there that can form their own culture, their own society, or be intermingled with, others, with just all of these unfortunate abilities when they die.
I do like the idea of some kind of plague or magical curse that affects the Dragonborn. And I'm envisioning, like, what it does is it actually transform them. And some of them are, will affect some of the Dragonborn in a way where maybe their firstborn will end up being these things or not. But, like, I almost see, like, this magical transformation happening, almost like a were creature, turning for the first time. But with a twist, like maybe it's fatal for some of them and not for others, and it's just kind of random, right? Mm-hmm. But you literally transform, you're a Draconian, and then you die. Well, what happens when a Draconian dies? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm envisioning this horrific story where, like, they start recognizing the symptoms, so they put all of those Dragonborn together in, like, a huge lodge or whatever, and then, like, then the changes start happening, and some of them just change, but others change and die, but the others changing and dying activates their death throes, which then kills more of them, which activates their death. So it's like just this horrific scene of massacre.
So with the ability of this being a curse or an issue, like it could lead to some awesome plot threads of like, oh, you want to play a Dragonborn, but your sibling, your child, your uncle, what have you, is cursed to be one of these Draconians, so maybe you're on a quest to find some way to rectify that and be like, okay, forget whatever else is going on. Like your core story is trying to find this and turn a Draconian into a Dragonborn.
Yeah, like, maybe maybe there's a mark or something, and that manifests at birth, but then, or when they first get it, or birth, whichever you choose. But once they hit like a certain point in their life, like if they become adults or maturity, that's when the transformation is going to happen. So if you're one of these Dragonborn, or you have a child dragon that's one of these Dragonborn and had a mark, once they mature, like there's a 50-50 chance they change and evolve into a Draconian, or they change and evolve into a dead Draconian.
Like you could look at it and like you could even add some cool like lore into it of like, whether you've got a, one born of fire, your gold Dragonborn or your red Dragonborn, and it's like, you can feel the fire diminishing inside, like, their temperature's going down, and it's like, this is the sign, and like, oh no, well, now we know what's happening because their tail's coming in. Like you can have these things that wind up being small little sentences, but like they can be the forebearers of different sayings that were done when plagues were literally happening, of like whether it be chicken pox or something, like, okay, they've got spots, or his tail's growing in, like that's a serious problem for Dragonborn because they know that they're being turned into these Draconians.
What's going on, buddy? Was that a little bit of wingage there back there? What's happening? Something you want to tell me? No, it's fine. Pulls a clip tighter. So I think you can have fun with it. I think you can link them together and think of fun ways to introduce Draconians into your world, even if you aren't playing in Krynn and using Dragonlance, whether it's the Forgotten Realms or your own homebrew campaign.
If you enjoy all the content that Nerdarchy puts out there, why not check out Nerdarchy the store, or even better, check us out over on Patreon and support us over there.
And let us know what you think. Do you prefer Draconians or Dragonborn? Are Dragonborn just cheap knockoffs of Draconians? What's your favorite? Do you like the new Draconian art, or like me, do you prefer the original Draconian art? Let us know down in the comments below.
While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, click on that notification bell. You know the drill.
Quick reminder, we drop several videos here on the channel every week, so come on back. But you can't, well, then no worries, we got you covered. Check the card up here. D&D Dragonborn, which character class should you play?
So until next time, stay nerdy.